was Pamela Lyndon Travers, the mysterious woman who introduced Mary Poppins to the world, but insisted she didn't create the character. Helena Lyndon Gough grew up in Australia in the early 1900s. Her father was a banker from London who moved to Australia, where he married a Scottish woman, and together they had 3 daughters. Travers Gough was obsessed with Irish poetry, especially the works of William B. Yeats, and his daughter Helen certainly inherited this love of poetry and literature, and Irish poetry especially. In fact, Travers was so infatuated with Irish culture in general that he convinced himself and his daughter Helen that he was Irish, which was not true. He was English through and through. He was from London, and so was his father. They were both bankers, in fact. But Pamela was insistent throughout the years in interviews that her family, came from Irish stock and that she was Irish. She had a definite bond with her father, as we've discussed, but tragically, he battled alcoholism and died. Losing this battle, he died in 1907, leaving behind his widow and 3 daughters. And Helen would change her name to Pamela Lyndon Travers, her fictitious surname inspired by her father's first name, Travers. And she would never quite recover from this painful loss. Her father was the inspiration for the character Mr. Banks, the central character of the Mary Poppins series. And really, if you pay attention, you will realise that Mary Poppins doesn't come to Cherry Tree Lane to rescue the children. She actually comes to rescue their father. And one could argue that Pamela was perhaps reimagining her childhood through the Poppins stories. Oh, pardon me. Going too far with the slides. Before leaving Australia for England, Pamela briefly flirted with an acting career and even joined a Shakespeare company in Australia. She came to England finally in her early 20s. She'd always dreamed of coming back to England, where her family were from originally. She also spent time in Ireland, where she became acquainted with one of her father's heroes, W.B. Yeats, the great poet. But her most intimate bond in Ireland was with the writer George William Russell, who wrote with the pseudonym A.E. And they were very close. Sorry, I'm having trouble with the slides. Bear with me, folks. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the presentation, Travers always rejected the notion that she created Mary Poppins. She said Mary Poppins arrived one day when she was ill, living with a friend in the countryside in Sussex. This character just appeared and suddenly she had 3 chapters written of the first book. Initially, Pamela Travers didn't expect publishers to be interested in the stories, but she was proved wrong in 1934 when the first of 8 Mary Poppins books was published. and the first book especially was instantly popular in England and around the globe. The illustrator of the books was none other than Mary Shepherd, whose father had illustrated The Wind in the Willows and Winnie the Pooh. As I say, the Poppins stories were instantly popular in England, but also in other parts of the world, including the United States. And that includes Walt Disney's daughter, who introduced him to the stories. Um, and he first expressed an interest in adapting Mary Poppins for the silver screen as early as the late 1930s. His brother Roy Disney had visited Pamela in New York City when she was living there during the London Blitz. So he actually got his brother Roy to visit Pamela before he ever met Pamela himself. Um, she was initially against the idea, not just against the idea of Mary Poppins being made into a film, but especially against the idea of Disney making a film. She was famously repulsed by the first feature-length cartoon, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. In fact, she wrote a highly unflattering review of the popular film in a London newspaper. She was appalled by Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and as one could imagine, was horrified by the very idea of this man Disney um, uh, giving the same treatment to her beloved Mary Poppins. But in 1961, that's how long it took. In 1961, Disney finally convinced Pamela. He offered her $100,000 in cash, a 5% of the profits, and gave her the position of script consultant. And the film was finally made. Now, it has been said that Pamela despised Disney's adaptation, but in truth, throughout the years, she expressed numerous positive thoughts regarding the film. She endorsed Julie Andrews as the title character, saying she was she endorsed Julie Andrews, but she did also say she was too attractive and had the wrong nose. But she was also very complimentary of David Tomlinson's performance as Mr. Banks, saying that he was absolutely right for the role. Now that is high praise indeed, coming from Pamela. Let's remember that this character, Mr. Banks, was inspired by her own father. This may come as a surprise to those who believe that, who have been told that she detested Disney and detested and despised the adaptation. This will come as a surprise. Pamela collaborated with her friend, the historian Brian Sibley, in the late 1980s on a sequel for Disney based on one of the sequels, Mary Poppins Comes Back. It never came to fruition, but the Disney studios were very keen to cast none other than Michael Jackson as Bert's younger brother, and he was still black at the time. So that's very unrealistic, to think a black man would be selling ice cream in Edwardian London. It's hard to believe. But who knows, it may have worked. He could certainly sing, he could certainly dance, who knows. And although the sequel that Pamela kind of wrote with Brian Sibley was never made, the sequel itself, of course, it was never made, but supposedly there are elements or bits from her treatment that inspired Cameron Mackintosh's stage musical Yeah, I have seen actually on the West End, and it's very good. Uh, the Cameron Mackintosh stage show. So that's a kind of presentation on the life of Pamela Travers, her story, the Mary Poppins um, story, really, from book to film, as it were. Um, I hope you enjoyed the video, and please let me know if you enjoyed the video, and that may encourage me to make further videos of this nature, of this manner. You know, so it's always good to have to receive feedback, whether it's positive or not. You know, I always like to get feedback. So thanks again, folks, and I'll see you next time.